Welcome back to an interview episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine. We have a very special guest with us today. In the early days of home microcomputers, there is no doubt that there was one game machine, especially out of the Holy Trinity. That was the Apple II. And there was one company whose games really stood out more than any others, especially on a technical level, and those were the games from Sirius Software. And we are here today with, and you're going to have to correct me if I'm right on this, founder or co-founder of Sirius, Jewell.
Well, I'm going to say co-founder. Terry Bradley was the other person that was the financial manager, and he owned the facility where we started doing all of our disk copying and stuff, so it made sense to make him co-owner. So we were equal partners.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I wasn't clear on that. So, well, first off, welcome to the show.
Yep.
Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Okay, so now, before we get into Sirius and all that, I'd like to go back always a step and to ask people, what was their educational background? What was their career path going into this? So did you go to college? What was your background?
Well, I went into the Army right out of high school. Got shot up in Vietnam, came back on the VA bill, went to college and got my bachelor's degree in anthropology from UCLA.
Very cool.
Tried to go to grad school and couldn't afford it, and ended up working for an insurance company for about 5 years.
Okay, and what were you doing for the insurance company?
I was what was called a special agent. I would go out and evaluate very strange risks, things like radio towers or ocean cargo, or a marine underwriter and field investigator sort of a job. Interesting.
It
was pretty weird. The problem with the job was the only way I could advance was to move to the centers of the marine industry, the marine insurance industry, which was London, New York, or Tokyo. I didn't want to live in any of those places. So as my interest in the business sort of collapsed, I went out and decided I'd learn something new, and I bought an Apple II computer. I actually had to take out a $1,500 loan to buy an Apple II computer and a cassette player and a color TV to hook up to. So, and then started studying nights, up till 2 or 3 in the morning every single night.
Wow. Now, were you taking any kind of formal classes for this? And just to clarify, what year are we talking about here?
We're talking 1979, 1980. Okay.
And yeah, formal classes, or were you teaching yourself how to program?
A few months after I bought the Apple II, a guy named Pell, a local fellow who was one of the founders of the Sacramento Apple group, the Apple SAC they called it, he came to me and said, hey, there's a class at Lawrence Hall of Science on Wednesday nights on advanced machine language, assembly language programming. You want to take it? I didn't know what assembly language was. And I said, sure. It was taught by Andy Hertzfeld from Apple. And I took my cassette recorder that I had borrowed money to buy, and I recorded every single lecture. Did not understand a word that he said for the 8 or 10 weeks of the class, but I had all the tapes. And over the next couple of years, I was able to go over the tapes and learn what he was talking about and able to apply it. But Andy was a great guy. It was really a pleasure to have to go to that class.
Wow, I believe that. I have to ask, do you still have those tapes?
No, I don't.
Too bad. That would be really something of historical value right there.
I have no idea where they're at. But.
Okay, so you're teaching yourself this. Now you're still working for the insurance company at this point, and you're doing this as a sideline?
Well, I had planned on quitting but luckily enough, they fired me. So I went to work as the sales manager for the first computer land that opened up in Sacramento. And that was owned by Barry Bradley. And I was sales manager there. And that's when we started Sirius Software, was out of the store.
Okay. So you're working in the computer land now. How big is the chain at this point?
I don't remember, maybe 20 or 30 stores. And working, that was a weird organization, but the store was fun to work in, and all of the Apple owners always came in there. It was a regular place to meet. It was a great place to meet other Apple owners, especially if you're a sales manager.
Now, for somebody who unfortunately missed out on that portion of the history, describe what a computer land. I'm guessing it wasn't a franchise operation.
It was a franchise, and it was a modern retail store. It had all Apple II computers, nothing else.
Okay. And so you're working there, and the owner of the place, and you start Sirius from inside the store. Now, does this just come out of putting a label on some of the software that's being sold there? How does that process happen?
No, I was looking for something to display images in the store window at night, because there was a lot of night traffic because of the next door restaurants. And there was no way to create any images. And then Nasir Gebelli came in the store one day. He and I had been friends, and he was in the Apple SAC group. And he had created a slideshow program for the Apple II, which was really cool. I thought that's perfect for the store windows. Just put a computer right there in the store and put whatever sales messages you wanted on it, or pictures or whatever. But then that created a dilemma, is there wasn't really any way to create graphics on the Apple II in an interactive way. And so I started designing the first desktop publishing program, EasyDraw, that lets you combine graphics and text together on the same page. I used a text generator from Synergistic Software to let you put in different size fonts and different color fonts, and mix that in, blended that right into the program code. Nasir wrote fill routines for objects, and we combined it all together, and I took the software package called EasyDraw at that point, and was able to create some cool stuff for the store. And then I said, we really got to sell this. And so I packaged it up, and I started visiting all the computer stores in California, and I put it in a consignment. So we were using the Computerland store to do duplication at night, and using the copy machine to make copies of the documentation. And but I went all over the state, and I put lots and lots of these in. So while I was doing that, Nasir was back at home writing a couple of video games. One of them was both Barrels and Duck Hunt. And so I said, okay, we came up with a company name when we did EasyDraw. And I said, let's market those too, And so put them in a package and put them on a consignment, and they started selling. And then I went away somewhere for Christmas, and I came back, and Nasir had written in 30 hours flat a game called Spacex. And it was the first game fully in assembly code that we had done, and it was amazing compared to anything else on the market at the time. And so that really started selling crazy. Got a bug flying around in here somewhere. And that took off really well. We were selling a lot of those, and we were not doing consignment anymore. The dealers were actually buying the products and putting them on the shelves, and we'd sort of taken off. And that's when we decided we weren't big enough to really get to all places in the country. And so we set up Synergistic Software as a distributor of our products, and they were co-labeling. So that went on for probably almost a year, I'm guessing, and we had a great relationship with them. And they were, because they already had a distribution network set up for their software all over the country. So they were able to really expand our market quickly. But in the meantime, other authors came in. Nasir wrote some more games. The company took off. We ended up doing about $1.5 million gross in our first year. And we outgrew Synergistic too quickly. They couldn't keep up with our growth. And so we kindly and in a friendly way said goodbye. And then we ended up signing on with, in the next year, we ended up signing on with major distributors like SoftCell and MicroD and that sort of thing, and going mainstream with products. So it grew crazy. I think by the end of the third year, I think we were doing about $3.5 million.
Wow.
We had 18 full-time employees, and we were really expanding like crazy. But it was a very small market back then. I mean, we were really, everybody knew everybody. Bill Gates, Jobs, Woz, everybody went to the same trade shows and the same parties, and it was very close-knit industry. When we wanted to come up with a new game, we'd check with Broderbund and with Sierra Online, with Ken, and say, hey, we've got to come up with the race car games. You guys aren't working on a race car game, are you? So we wouldn't step on each other's toes, And we're pulling pranks on each other and, doing all kinds of, it was a close, we have Christmas parties together and things, and go rafting together. And it was a very small, fun business before IBM jumped in.
Gotcha. Now, I want to step a few steps back here, because when you say you were these first games, I mean, you said you were photocopying documentation and so forth. At what point, I'm guessing you're doing this all plastic baggy style in the very first phase?
6x9 plastic bags, yeah, with a single 8.5 and 11 sort of cardboard fold over in color, and with the instructions on the inside and the disc sitting on the inside.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of what the dealers wanted, because they wanted to put them on pegboards.
Okay.
The standard way of displaying. So the trick then became, you're on the pegboard with 100 other products. You wanted your product to show off. Wanted to really show up. So we were really bright colors. We even went to a 3D lenticular cover on one game, so that as you walk by, it moved in your eyesight. That was that Snakebite. I think it was Snakebite that we did that on.
Okay.
Very full lenticular material cover that looked like it was moving as you went by, and there were 7 images in that particular cover that made it animate.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty cool. How much now? I mean, I'm just trying to imagine a relatively small company at the beginning. When you guys are even thinking about going to more complex packaging, how do you go about? I'm guessing you've never done this before, so how do you even go about doing that?
Well, we hired a graphic designer, Terry. Damn, I can't remember her last name. Really talented graphic, and we started our own in-house ad agency and graphics design department. So we did all of that in-house. We even had outside clients, like Aerojet was one of our clients. We did publications for them on their various weapon systems and stuff like that. It was pretty weird.
Wow.
Kind of weird to have the Snakebite cover laying next to the new artillery shell that could kill the tank,
Wow, that is weird.
So we went to boxes eventually, because they were harder to steal. The dealers were wanting something a little more difficult to steal off the shelf.
Okay. And so you start your distribution with Synergistic. What I mean, without going into numbers or anything, but what were the kind of conditions that a distributor of software had at that time for a publisher like Sirius?
Profit margins back then were really huge. So distributors usually got 15 to 20%, and dealers got 30 to 40%. So if you sold the game for $40, you'd net $16 out of it. And then you gave 20 to 30% of that to the author. And you paid $5 for a blank disc back in the early days. So but you're still making, pretty good money off of it. So obviously once the game is designed, there's no more to do than to sell it. So,
and especially if you have somebody like Nasir popping out a game in 30 hours, I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and he put out a pretty good library of softwares before he went and started his own company.
Now, at this point, so that's the situation with the distributors. When you have these employees and you're producing this product, and Sirius produces quite a few titles every year, especially in those early years. Now, what is your relationship with the developers? Do you have any in-house employee developers, or are all the developers contract basis?
We did end up hiring, I'm going to think 8 or 9 in-house programmers eventually. Most of them were working on Atari VCS video games that were going to be licensed through Fox Video Games, who were an evil organization.
Yeah, I definitely have some questions about that relationship. Okay, so but your home computer, the Apple II, Atari 8-bit, and so forth development, that wasn't done in-house for the most part.
That was done in-house.
Oh, that was done in-house as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did have outside programmers who would submit games, and we would take them. We'd have quite a few outside programmers like Tony and Benny No and others. And if we could, we hired them in-house because we'd rather have them, close and under contract than, just game by game. But they got great royalties. Dan Thompson, we met him at a trade show in Phoenix, and he was working at Jack in the Box.
Wow.
And brought him in-house. And he was, he made like $80,000 his first quarter with us.
Wow. That's 1980.
Jack in the Box money. To that. Ran out and bought a brand new Corvette.
Oh, geez. Okay, so yeah, those are in some insane numbers. So okay, so you're bringing in the talent in-house, but even though they're in-house, you are also they're still getting paid royalties, which wasn't an across-the-board approach at the time in the industry, was it?
Some of the in-house guys were getting salaries. The guys working on the VCS games were somewhere in the $45,000 a year range. They all had profit-sharing plans and benefits, and so none of which came to pass. But that's a whole different issue.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so you've moved up to the big guys, soft sell and so forth. You're getting the distribution. Now, from your standpoint, what kind of relationships do you have at this point with retailers? Because you are going for distribution through a third party, but how are you guys keeping track of what's actually happening on the retail shelves?
Well, we hired a marketing, I should say a sales guy, and he got us into Kmart, Toys R Us directly. He handled European distribution. So he handled some of the really big accounts, which, in retrospect, we should never have gotten into. So,
why was that? What became problem?
Well, let me give you Kmart as an example.
Okay.
Kmart bought a certain amount of games. I don't remember what the total was. It was a lot. And we had to spend quite a bit of money to get into Kmart because we had to come up with posters and other incentives for them to take on our product line. So we were out a lot of money to get in there. We shipped them the product that they ordered, and it sat in their warehouse. But under the contract that we had written, they had, as long as it was on an unopened package, they could return it. So they ended up returning, I don't know, probably over $1 million worth of product.
Oh, geez.
We never got a penny out of it. We never got a penny from Kmart.
Wow. And did you ever find out why they didn't put the product out on the shelf?
Incompetence, I think.
Oh, geez.
Of course, they're not around now, so that kind of explains that.
Yeah, just a little bit. Oh, that sucks. Now, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so your sales through people like SoftSell were mainly to more mom and pop organizations or dedicated computer shops?
Computer chains, mom and pops, the whole realm, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, so you've got this going on. What is, and I'm going to stick just with the Apple II and home computer area before we get into the console stuff. But in this Apple II area, you talked about trade shows, especially since everybody knew everybody back then. And of course, there were also some magazines out there. How did you guys, what was Sirius's direct relationship with media outlets and with the customer base like?
Well, media outlets, that kind of boiled down to Soft Talk, which was the Apple II magazine, and Creative Computing, which was basically Apple and Atari. And we did a lot of advertising in both of those. Of course, we had a really good relationship with Soft Talk, Margot, and the rest of the crowd there. So they got a ton of money from us for advertising, and they treated us well, and it went pretty good.
Okay.
We were taking out full-page ads every month, so it worked great.
Cool. And was there any kind of direct relationship with the customer base at this point?
I'm not sure what you mean, what you're asking.
Well, I mean, you had trade events.
We did not really have any direct contact with customers, if that's what you mean.
Yeah. Oh,
fact,
okay.
We didn't want direct contact. We certainly didn't want to deal with any kind of warranty or support issues. So we put, and I think we may be the only company that did this, we put a copy of the game on both sides of the disc so that if somebody called and said, hey, my game doesn't boot anymore, we could tell them to turn the disc over.
Oh, really? That's actually an ingenious idea. Okay, so you guys purposely put a copy of the game on each side of the disc just to avoid having to do any kind of, or to cut down on warranty issues?
Yes.
That's pretty ingenious.
Yes. Tom McWilliams was a kid who was pirating our games and everybody else's and lived over in the Bay Area. And we ended up hiring him to come in and do copy protection for us. But he and some of the other guys got together and wrote what's called 4.4 encoding on the Apple II disc. We could copy an entire 360K disc in 4 seconds.
Wow. And
so we set the assembly line so that it was extremely simple to copy on both sides because it was only 4 seconds. And then, so it would go in 4 seconds, flip the disc over, put it back in for 4 seconds, go to the machine next to it, get tested on both sides, and then go into label and packaging. So the whole duplication process was probably less than 30 seconds.
Oh, that's insane.
Because the games would also boot in 4 seconds.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was pretty crazy. Apple used what was called 6.2 encoding, and it could take a minute to boot something, but the 4.4 encoding was just crazy.
Oh, that's cool. So, okay, now you guys are pretty much dedicated to the Apple II in the early phase of the company.
Yes, definitely.
Then you start to branch out. Now, was the Apple II dedication just because that's what you had available to you at Computerland and what you knew, or was there a business decision behind it?
That's it. Yeah. The Atari 400, 800 didn't come out until later. And then we moved into it pretty quickly, but mostly by translating the games we already had. But, then IBM and then Commodore VIC-20 and Commodore 64 and 128. And there was all the Z80 based stuff. ASCII computers in Japan had the Z80 based stuff, and we were licensing through Microsoft. I think at last count, we had put out about 165 titles total.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a lot more than you might imagine.
So, okay, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and you just mentioned that you were licensing them out to the Japanese market through Microsoft. Right. I have to ask, what was the mechanic of that deal like?
I flew up and had a meeting with Bill Gates, and who owned the company called ASCII in Japan, and they got licensing rights to Japanese language versions of some of our games.
Okay, so these would have been the MSX versions of the games, correct? Sorry, the Microsoft, the ones that Microsoft
they were completely translated, so they were Z80 versions.
Yeah, that would have been the MSX standard. Okay, that's the connection there with Microsoft. Okay, sorry, I was just trying to put it in my head.
These were not for PCs. These were other types of Z80 machines.
Gotcha. Okay, and so you guys have built up a fairly robust back catalog. You're on the Apple II now. I'm guessing this is where we have to start talking your transition into doing 2600 titles, which I'm guessing happens around 82, 83.
Yeah, it would have to be 80, 83, early 83 probably.
Okay.
It's a long time.
No problem. No, the exact dates aren't really all that important. It's just so I have a rough idea in my head. So how does that decision happen inside the company?
Boy, that's a tough one. I don't remember. I do not remember how we came about that. I do remember that we put a pretty extensive effort into trying to decipher how to program the machine on our own, and weren't successful, but we were able to find on the black market, or whatever you want to call it, a copy of the VCS programming manual that was supposedly locked down in secret from Atari.
Okay.
One of their ex-programmers, I have no idea. Somebody came in with it one day and said, "We got it solved." And I said, "Great."
Cool. And so you guys start to develop games. Are you trying first to port existing titles over to the system, or what's your strategy for choosing which titles to try to push onto the system?
Let me back up a minute. I think it all started because Fox Video Games came to us and wanted us to develop VCS games based on their movie titles.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's what got us into it, but we may have been trying to get into it before then. I don't remember the overlay there, but we didn't translate any of the existing titles.
Gotcha. And Fox approached you guys.
Yes.
With the license. Okay. And what does that kind of what did that agreement look like at the time? I mean,
basically, they were going to pay us a royalty, and they paid us money up front to hire programmers and get them on staff and get them going. So the guys that were on salary were basically the money that Fox had given us up front went to that. I mean, 100% of it or more. And of course, we never got any royalties out of them, so we all got screwed. So.
Oh, geez. What? And I have to ask. I know it's a minutia, but how are they calculating the royalty? I mean, was it just going to be a percentage of what was left at the end? Was there any kind of goals?
I do not remember the details of that contract.
Okay.
I do remember that by our calculations, when Fox bankrupted their Fox Video Games, they set it up as a separate corporation so that they could bankrupt it and not affect the rest of Fox.
Yeah.
At the time they bankrupted it, we thought they owed us $14 million.
Wow.
And we never got a penny of that.
Oh, geez. So you guys developed quite a few titles for them right off the bat. I'm guessing you probably had some more in the pipeline when the whole thing went kablooey.
I don't remember which ones were in the pipeline. I can't remember how many titles we did offhand. But yeah, there was a lot of time and money invested there, and all to naught.
Yeah. So you guys are making these games for them for 20th Century. Yeah. Now, 20th Century, you guys weren't the only company making games for them at this point, correct?
I think we were.
Oh, okay. So
if there's somebody else, I don't know about it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And did you also have access to any of their licenses for computer-based games at this point, or was it exclusively for 2600 titles?
No, it was just for their own marketing.
Okay.
And they came to us with specific titles that they wanted to do video games around. And some of them were like some weird John Wayne movie. It's like, no, you can't do... so some of them we just had to turn down. But, the higher-ups at 20th Century Fox were telling Fox Video Games, we want this title pushed, on the video game market. And there was it was sort of like our experience with Disney, trying to do video games for Disney, and they wanted things that were impossible.
Oh, so Disney... Okay, we'll have to come back to the Disney thing in just a moment then, because I've talked to Al Lowe about his experience working on Disney titles at Sierra Online. So I'd love to hear what your experience was, just to compare those two.
Well, they called us and wanted us to do some video games, and so Ernie Brock and I headed down to Burbank, and they gave us a quick tour of the animation studio, and there's this little old 85-year-old man in this warehouse, in these little cubicles drawing cells for hand drawn, and that was just a horrible experience seeing them. I thought they were being tortured. But we ended up sitting in a room full of lawyers and them telling us, they want to do a game based on Dumbo, and they had these very specific rules. It has to be this color gray. And of course, the Apple II had, 6 colors? It didn't have. Gray wasn't one of the colors. And the whole thing kind of fell apart right away when they found out that they couldn't set all the rules that they wanted because it wasn't physically possible. So we weren't there very long, as I recall it. But when we told them we couldn't do gray for Dumbo, that really kind of put a hole into the whole conversation, I think. And we ended up wanting a contract from Disney.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of jives with, Yeah, Aldo told a very interesting anecdote about it, just how he realized very quickly that they were going to put too many limits on it. Roberta didn't. So Roberta went through hell with them on her game, and Al basically just dodged them every chance he had. And then when the deadline was there, he said, "Here's the game." And they were like, "Well, we'd like to make changes." Like, we can't do that. We have a deadline. So they had to ship it the way it was. And but yeah, so okay, but yeah, they wanted a specific grade for Dumbo on an Apple II. That just sounds like corporate people who don't understand the technology at that point.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, back to 20th Century Fox. So you hired a bunch of people, you're making these games. Are you also in any capacity doing the manufacturing and packaging, or is this you just delivering ROMs and then the rest happens on 20th Century Fox's side?
No, they're doing all they're doing all the packaging on their end.
Okay. And so when do you realize something is not right in that situation?
Oh, we're not getting paid.
Okay. How quickly does that happen?
Oh, it takes several months, and then they're coming up with all kinds of excuses, and they're giving us a runaround. And we had audit rights to their books. We finally had to hire an accounting firm to go audit their books. So the accounting firm goes to Burbank and they say, "Oh, well, all those accounting records were transferred to Chicago." So the accounting guys get in the plane and they fly to Chicago. And by the time they get there, "Oh, well, those accounting files were transferred to Atlanta." And they never were able to trace down even one single transaction from start to end.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
No, not even one transaction. And it costs us, I don't know, a couple $100,000 in accounting fees to try to audit them. It went on for quite a long time. And then, of course, they filed bankruptcy and there was nothing.
Hmm. Oh,
at the same time that Kmart's sending all their stuff back and Toys R Us is sending all their stuff back, and we're getting screwed on those bills. And it was just overwhelming. It was.
I can imagine that's got to have just been a devastating year. I mean, it's so. At what point do you realize that Sirius itself is in trouble from all of this?
We didn't think we were in trouble until Terry had taken out a line of credit based on our receivables from basically MicroD and SoftCell, which was, I think, about $400,000. And Bank of America, with no justification whatsoever, he yanked our line of credit and confiscated our receivables. And so we had no money coming in.
Oh, jeez.
So that's what put an end to it. So apparently, I don't know where Bank of America got their information, but they probably found out that Toys R Us and Kmart weren't paying us and Fox wasn't paying us, and we were no longer a good credit risk.
Gotcha. Now, this would have all happened. Was this all still in '83, or was it already in '84?
Kind of dragging late '83 into '84. Yeah, I don't remember the exact months, but yeah, it was not a fun time. And then we were forced into bankruptcy. We couldn't pay. We had hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses out front for ROMs, for ROM-based games for Atari 400, 800s, Commodore, VIC 20. Because it took 6 months to get a ROM made back then.
Yeah.
So we paid for all those ROM development out front. And by the time the ROMs came back, markets for them, Toys R Us, Kmart, all the others, had dried up. There was no place to sell them. So we became like Atari, bulldozing Pac-Man into the dump. We had all these boxes and boxes of ROMs that we had to pay for that we no longer had an income to pay for them with. And that kind of did it in. So.
Oh man! Now, where were you getting the ROMs manufactured back then? How?
I don't remember who the manufacturers were. I think it was TI.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, I wasn't sure exactly which companies were printing ROMs at that time for that market.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the ROM contracts. I don't remember. Ernie Brock might remember that. He was our product development manager.
Oh, okay. And so the company comes to an end at that point because of the bankruptcy. Is there any attempt to salvage the IP, to restructure or anything, or?
No, there's no money. There's nothing in the bank. Bank of America had attached everything and taken everything. The $400,000, I think, that we ended up with from other sources ended up in a trust fund operated by the bankruptcy attorney, controlled by, stolen by the bankruptcy attorney. And you can publicly announce that his name is Robert Meese Jr., and he stole $400,000 from us, and he eventually did go to jail, and I haven't heard anything since then about him. But all the money that we had left that the programmers were expecting to get disappeared in the bankruptcy trust fund. We weren't the only company that he ripped off, which is he ended up getting caught by ripping off some other company. We didn't actually know that we'd been ripped off until we found out that he'd ripped off a different company and gotten arrested. And then the district attorney came to us and said, "Where's your money?" It's like, gone, it's disappeared. So we never got any of it either. So we were really getting the shaft from everybody. And the programmers were hating us because the bankruptcy attorney was lying to us about what was going on, and we were passing that information on as if it was gospel. And then they found out that it was all lies, and they blamed us for it. So it was an ugly situation.
Oh wow, that's nasty. And did you try to stay in the industry at that point?
I did. I tried to set up a new software company to develop other things called Soft Pros. And the first product that I tried to develop was kind of a hardware-software combination, and I couldn't get any funding for it. It just wasn't out there. Then Chuck Somerville and I went to work for Electronic Arts for a brief period. Chuck for a lot longer than I did. I was doing basically consulting work with them. I drove down, I think, 2 days a week to Cupertino. And that didn't last very long. I think maybe 6 months or so. But Chuck stayed on game development for them.
Okay. What kind of products were you working on there?
I was working on a toy, a musical toy that you would hum into, and it could translate the tones, the notes, I should say, to a variety of different musical instruments. So it could detect the note that you were humming in and like play it on a violin.
Wow.
A little music synthesizer product called the Kazoom. I still have that proposal around somewhere.
Oh, that actually sounds cool. And
it still hasn't appeared on the market, so maybe there's still a market for it. And the processing power back then really wasn't there. It was more of a pie in the sky kind of an idea than it was a real product idea. But I was stretching myself out, trying to find something beyond my abilities. And I did.
So after EA, what did you end up doing?
I ended up being a VP of marketing for an accounting software firm for a short period. I think about a year or so. That was the worst job I think I've ever had. I was so bored out of my mind. Selling a product that I didn't like and didn't understand, and it wasn't complete. And
oh wow!
But the company was in debt. It had never made a dime. And I gave it its first 6 months of profitability.
Wow!
And then they didn't appreciate it. It was not a good fit. And then I went into back into the retail dealership again. Went back doing sales again. And
okay.
Made a pretty good living for a number of years, just doing graphic design systems for high-end graphic design systems. Typical sale was 25, 30 grand with 30% margins, kind of thing. Those
very cool.
Teaching classes on Adobe, Photoshop, and color separations and other high-end printing technology with Tom Mornini, who was one of the Sirius programmers.
Okay, so you were working with a programmer then on the sales. Sounds like an interesting combo, especially since you guys knew each other.
Yeah, well, Tom had become an expert in printing technology with desktop publishing, and he had his own firm doing color separations and stuff for the graphic design firms in town. So we were a perfect match.
Cool. And now you have a company called Skulltronix.
Yes.
How does that come about?
Well, I started building haunted houses in my front yard, and mostly to get the kids in the neighborhood together and getting them creative, and it went bananas. We were getting people waiting in line for 2.5 hours down the street, a couple thousand people at a time waiting to come into our little front yard haunted house.
Wow.
And then a new neighbor moved in next door, and he had 2 teenage boys. And so we expanded it into his yard. And then it just when they had to start closing the streets, and it just got to be out of control. So made an arrangement with the park down the street, the city park, to move it down there and run it in their little mini train yard system. And we did a partnership with the park district, and we set it up down there. And this is when Mike Fox and a couple of other really, really talented people came on board to help us. And we won. First year we did it, we won from the Haunt magazine. We won Best Haunted House in the country.
Wow.
Second year we got the Best Haunted House in the country, and then we stopped submitting videos after that. We said, okay, we've won that. 2006 was the last time we got that award, and after that we didn't submit to the contest anymore. But which was the same year that I got the Transworld, which is the big haunted house trade show. I got their award for best product in the haunt industry, and the same year I got it for having the best haunted house. So it was like, okay, I've covered both sides of that industry, but I'm still doing that. I build. Let me turn around here. I can show you. I build. This one's got the skull cap off, but these are animated skeletons that are used for complete shows. Mix them multiple together. There goes my tape roll again. Get this figured out. All right, back in the picture. Anyway, so that's sort of the core of the product line is the skulls in the haunted house market. But we've sold stuff to Universal, LucasArts, and lots of other big theme parks, and it's a high-end professional animation product, animatronic.
That is awesome.
I do other stuff. I do lighting, and I do special effects, and we do scripts and voices, and we do complete shows. We've got some pretty elaborate shows that we put together with multiple animatronics and projections and special effects. And
wow.
It's still in the entertainment industry, and it's still basically computer related.
Yeah, it definitely. Now, and just I'm trying to imagine. Number one, I did not know there was a trade show for the haunted house industry, but
yeah, it's huge.
Now I want to go. Now I want to go at some point.
It's in St. Louis. It's in St. Louis usually in February. It's called the Trans World Show or the Haunted Attractions something or other. I can't remember what the other acronym for it is, but it's a big show and it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Oh, I believe it. So now you're doing you're building it there in your shop, and for those listeners of the who aren't seeing the video here, you're surrounded by a whole bunch of what I mean real crafted stuff. Now, when you're doing the development for the software side, the controls and everything else, have you had to develop your own tools, or is there some kind of standard for that in the industry?
We partnered with a company called LifeApe to develop software, and we also sell we don't sell, but we use for creating our animation, we use a program called VSA. We have not gotten around to creating our own program that creates the animation, but we have our own programs that configure the electronics in the animatronic devices themselves, and that sequence and schedule and triggering and all that sort of thing is handled through a program called Helmsman, which is a scheduling program. So you can say, I want this animation to play now, and then there's going to be a delay, and then another program, and so you can schedule and set up all these sort of things and different ways to trigger devices so that they go off when a person walks up or whatever. So a lot of very sophisticated software along those lines.
Very cool. And
designed our own control board. It's the best animatronic control board on the market by far. We sell those as a separate product to people making their own animatronics.
Very cool. And so it's like a whole ecosystem for this product at this point. I guess the X element, like you said, recording audio and putting together the show, the narrative, and so forth. Do you have writers on staff for this, or is this?
We don't have them on staff, but they're freelancers that we hire to write scripts, voice actors with particular types of voices that we're looking for, and then the animation. I do a lot of it myself. But I also have a fellow over in the UK who does animation for me and loves doing it. So his stuff's pretty good.
Cool. Okay. When I looked you up and found you through Skulltronix, I was like, okay, I definitely have to ask about this because it looks pretty freaky from the stuff on the website.
There's lots of it on YouTube. We keep most of the videos are on YouTube, so look under the Skulltronix channel.
Well, I'll add them into the show notes that'll accompany the podcast. So going back just real quickly, you mentioned already a few of the former Sirius people that you're still in touch with. Obviously, the one name that always kept popping up with Sirius was Nasir's name.
I haven't had any contact with him in a long, long time. I don't know where he lives. I don't know what he's doing. Other people that I know from back then don't seem to know where he's at or what he's doing. I don't know. I'd like to see him again. He was a great guy.
Yeah, he has become a bit of a recluse. He showed up once a few years ago for an Apple II programmers reunion, but after that, he just kind of disappeared again. He was in Japan for a while, but okay. So I have one final question that I ask all of my interview subjects, and it's really a two-part question. The first part is during your time in the industry, what was one trend or development that you didn't see coming that was very big? And so what was one trend? Let's do that one first.
We didn't see IBM coming.
Oh, really?
And the industry going from a bunch of long-haired hippie, fun guys to a bunch of guys in suits, and it just destroyed the industry. It really did. It just sucked all the life out of it. Yeah, it turned it into a big business and took it away from being fun. But the funniest thing that I saw early on that I kicked myself now for was I was at what was the name of the club? It was the San Francisco Apple Club. Apple Core or whatever it was, and it was down there, and the guys were demonstrating VisiCalc for the first time. The very first spreadsheet ever on a computer of any kind. And it just bored the shit out of me. I could not figure out why anybody would want that program, and I couldn't have been more wrong. I should have immediately dumped the 35 cents that I had into it, and supported those guys. But I just didn't understand it at all. I just didn't get it. And I was so bored at the meeting. And, of course, they took off and made millions, and they got ripped off by Excel and all the other cops, Lotus and all the other copies. But,
yeah. Oh, man. And I guess the second one is, the second half of the question is, what was one development in the industry that you thought was going to be huge that ended up not going anywhere?
Oh, well, this was something that was internal to Sirius. We put probably $500,000 into developing a $68,000 processor-based graphics board that could analyze objects on screen in real time. And we were going to be able to play live video into it and have players be able to play video games and interact with live objects. And we had the board developed. We didn't have any games for it yet, or even the recognition software, but we had the board developed. It uses a fancy dual port memory so we could read and write to the same memory chip at the same time. And we took it to Comdex and set it up and shut it off, and had a lot of interest and had a lot of people saying, "Oh my God, we've been trying to do stuff like." We were 20 years ahead of ourselves. And nothing ever came of it because we folded before we could finish developing it. It was pretty cool. We had an engineer called Jerry Dingman. He's still around. I hope he is. He's a cool guy. And he was doing most of the hardware stuff. Pretty fun.
Cool. Oh, I'll have to track him down. That does sound like, so basically you would have the video projection, and it was basically like a blue screen or green screen effect where they would then be interacting with objects. Am I understanding the text right?
There was no blue screen or green screen. This was like if you were filming, think of Frogger, but think of a live camera on a freeway. And you've got to touch across the traffic in a live freeway.
Okay. So it's recognizing
detect the cars and detect whether your little avatar collided with them or not, and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I still don't think there's anything like that out there in the video game market I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the only thing that even comes close would have been, I can't remember what Sony called it. They had this camera you attached to a PlayStation 2 back in the day. So you basically would show up on the screen with the background, and then maybe balls would be flying at you. And if you swatted with your arm, it interacted with the ball, and then you push the ball away.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, Xbox did the same thing with the Kinect system. Kinect also did a similar thing, but I mean, we're talking 25 years later. It would have been amazing to see it back in the day.
We also tried Neurological Controls.
Okay.
Briefly, we had a headset. We were doing galvanic skin resistance and other types of biofeedback to control video games. So we had a guy come in who had designed one, and it was basically a submarine that went through a cave, and you either had to relax or get excited to make the submarine move up and down and maneuver through the cave. But so it was very crude, but it was a beginning. We also thought we were going to be able to develop, using our 68,000 board, we were going to combine it with Pioneer Laserdisc players. We thought Laserdisc players were going to be really hot. And they weren't reliable enough to run for even 1 month. I think we went through 4 or 5 of them in a couple of weeks, it seemed like. And you couldn't get them repaired. You just had to go out and buy a new one because there weren't any repair facilities. They were just total failure. I still have a pile about 4 foot high of Laserdisc around somewhere. And they're worth nothing.
Well, there is a collector's market for those. If you go on eBay, you may actually be able to get some shekels for those.
I've looked, yeah. eBay, by the way, there's somebody on eBay who, I don't know who it is, who takes the original Sirius Software titles and duplicates them completely. I mean, packaging, labels, everything, and sells them for $30 or $40 a game.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen it off and on. I don't know who it is, but they put a lot of effort into it.
Sirius still has this cult following. I mean, it's a legendary company and it's that moment in time, especially in the Apple II scene, that, like I said at the beginning, it's at a time when there was really only one gaming computer out there. There weren't a lot of companies that were really doing amazing stuff, and it was Sirius that doing it.
Yeah.
So,
have you had a chance ever to look up Larry Miller, who is one of our outside developers?
No, not at all.
He might be one of the most interesting guys that we ever had doing work for us. He came to us, I think he was 45 years old. Wow. He had and he came and showed us Epic, the game Epic, and we were blown away. He was doing stuff on an Apple II that nobody had come even close to. And he was a PhD physicist. He was a medical doctor. And he seemed to lose interest in things quickly. Came to us. He developed a copy protection scheme where he could vary the clock speed of the Apple II while it was writing data to the disk, and then be able to detect that later on a regular machine. It's the most bizarre thing, be able to vary the clock speed of a computer. I don't think anybody else has ever varied the clock speed of a computer as it runs. But he left us, and then after he did Hadron, and did we do a Hadron 2? I think just Hadron. And he went on to develop artificial hearts.
Really?
Yeah. Just the most fascinating guy. It's just holy shit, just so far ahead of, what you think is smart.
Wow. He's probably not around anymore. I'm guessing if he came to you guys at 45, but
I think he was older. He was older than I was. Yeah.
I'll have to look him up then and see if I can find him. Wait, actually, he has a LinkedIn profile. Oh no! It's not him. It's not him.
Oh, you're looking for him?
I just put him in, and it's a guy called Larry Miller, but he works for a company called Software Sales, Sirius Computer Solutions. Oh. It's a different company.
Yeah, we sued them, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when they came out with the name Sirius Computer, yeah, we took them to court. We hired the best lawyers we could get. We spent about $250,000 on legal fees, and we went to court, and they asked for a delay, because their head attorney was in the midst of another case. And so the judge said, okay, we'll delay for 2 weeks. And the story just always cracks me up when I remember it. But the rule is when they put a stay on a case, nothing is allowed to transpire during that stay. You're not supposed to do anything about new evidence or new witnesses or anything like that. Well, they turned around and bought a bankrupt company out of Tennessee that had gone bankrupt 10 years before with the name Sirius. And when they came back from the court again, and the judge saw what they did, he told the stenographer to leave the room. And he looked at the attorneys for Sirius Computer, and he said, what you've done is against all legal ethics, and I could have your attorney privileges yanked for the state of California for your entire firm for doing this. And he says, you're going to go out in the hallway with these young men, and you're going to settle this. And when you come back, you're going to tell me what you decided, and then we're going to proceed as if I didn't say a thing to you during this break when the stenographer. So they ended up paying all of our legal fees. They ended up paying, of course, all the legal fees and a little bit of damages, but we hadn't gotten to the damages section. But we got our legal fees back, and then they started using the name in Europe, Germany specifically. They sued us. We sued them in Germany, and they were a German company, and we were an American company suing them in Germany for using our name there. And you would have thought that the German courts would have found in their favor, but they didn't. They found in our favor, and they had to close down there too. They ended up coming back as Sirius Computer some years later and reusing the name again, which who cares at this point? But
but still,
it was, I don't know, in the whole process, there may have been $2 or $3 million in legal fees that were thrown out.
Wow.
It was like
insane.
Where does all this money come from? I remember the most I ever made at Sirius was $150,000 a year, and I loaned back $90,000 of it to the company.
Oh wow.
That's the most I ever made, was $60,000 in 1 year.
Oh Jesus.
We had programmers like Nasir were getting $250,000.
Well, and this is a big question because right around this time, there's a lot of companies that are getting venture capital. I talked to yes and no. A couple of them did talk to Ed Zarin of Muse Software, and he was approached by a venture capitalist back in the day about this. And he just didn't know what he was going to do with the money. I was wondering if you ever got any of those offers for Sirius.
No, never looked for them and probably wouldn't have taken them. It was quite a big bundle of events that forced us out. That all happened at the same time. Everything from the crooked bankruptcy attorney to Toys R Us and Kmart and the complete collapse of the market. It was, what do they call it when it's a wave? What's it called?
The opposite of serendipity.
It was a calamity.
A calamity. There you go.
Yeah, there was just no way out of it. There was no way forward.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's. So, my list of questions here has been exhausted. Any other wonderful anecdotes? Anything that I forgot to ask that I should have asked?
I'll tell you a story about a trade show in Phoenix.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of the trade show, but Brother Bond and Sarah Online and us all got conned into going to this video game trade show or computer trade show in Phoenix. And we got there, and there were very few people. Just no audience whatsoever. And so we decided we do what we usually do, is play pranks on each other. So there was a Boy Scout troop that had a remote control robot that was pretty cool, and they were running around trying to show it off. But another guy showed up with a little R2-D2 kind of thing who was paid by the show to be there. And he was standing up in front of the crowd and telling him that this was the smartest computer in the world, that it was controlled through the computers of NASA, and telling all these lies and running this thing around, and it was going beep, 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 and it was driving, and he was secretly driving it around and acting like it was self-controlled. And so Tom McWilliams was a pretty good RC expert, and he was about 16 years old then. He snuck over and looked at the back of the guy's remote control, literally laying on the ground underneath the guy, looking up at the remote control, and got the frequency off of it. So he and Jim Ackerman, who was the production manager for us, took off in a rental car, and they started driving all over the city of Phoenix looking for a remote control with the same frequency. And when they finally got one, they finally got to a store that had one, but the guy said, "This is my own, I can't sell it." And they told him what they wanted to use it for. And the guy said, "Here, take it and keep it," and gave it to him. And they came back with a remote, and Tom hid it in a plastic bag and with some popcorn, and acted like he was eating popcorn when actually he was controlling this guy's robot. And this guy's doing his spiel, and the robot takes off across the floor and trips over some cables and crashes. And he has to get control of it again. And it just went on for hours. Then the guy realized that somebody was pirating a signal, and he got the show security. Meanwhile, everybody at the show, except the guy with the robot, knew what was going on and were laughing their asses off. So he got the show security to go booth to booth searching for the remote control. And every booth was passing it to the next booth all the way around the show as the security moved through. And he never found it. And he ended up getting kicked out of the show, which he should have been kicked out of the show because he was a fraud. And he ended up getting canceled on the next show that he had scheduled down in San Diego because he was a fraud. And we all felt really good about it because he was showing up the Boy Scouts who had something genuine to show off, and by lying about what he had. So it was a great show. It was great revenge. Great. So many people were involved in it. It was just hilarious.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, well, it was great talking with you. Let me know if you need anything else. All right. Nice talking to you.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.